Hello Year 10s, I'm sorry I can't be with you today, but that doesn't mean that you don't have work to do. Today we're going to look at three very important concepts in criminal law. These are the presumption of innocence, the burden of proof, and the standard of proof. Here's your learning intention. Please write this down in your Cornell notes. Your first learning intention is that you need to be able to describe the presumption of innocence. The second learning intention is that you need to be able to describe the burden of proof and the standard of proof for a criminal case. And the third learning intention is that you need to be able to explain the importance of the presumption of innocence, the burden of proof, and the standard of proof in a criminal case. When you come to the end of this video, and after you've done the questions, come back to this learning intention and make sure that you can do each of these three things. We're going to look at the presumption of innocence by looking at a number of different case scenarios. So let's take the first scenario. The police find Tom with a gun. Bill is lying dead, as you can see, in front of Tom. Bill has been killed by a bullet fired by Tom that has hit Bill in the heart. The question for you is, did Tom murder Bill? Take a moment to discuss this in your table groups while the video is paused. Some of you may well have concluded that Tom did in fact murder Bill. But did you consider that this may have been an accident? Perhaps Tom was out shooting in the woods, hunting rabbits. He fired his gun at a rabbit that he thought he heard rustling in the bush, but instead it was poor old Bill. And as a result, Bill was shot dead. Now, we can't be sure whether Tom deliberately shot Bill or whether it was truly an accident, and Tom truly thought that Bill was a rabbit rustling in the bush. If Tom did deliberately shoot Bill, then Tom will be guilty of murder, and the judge will sentence him to prison for 25 years. The question for you to discuss in your table groups is it fair for a jury to find Tom guilty of murdering Bill? And if so, why? Let's pause this video while you have a discussion in your table groups. Here's our next scenario. The police find Tom with a gun. Bill is lying dead in front of Tom. Bill has been killed by a bullet that has hit him in the heart. Again, the question for you is, did Tom murder Bill? Take a moment to discuss this in your table groups while the video is paused. Now, some of you, again, may have concluded that Tom did in fact murder Bill. But did you consider the possibility that someone else might have shot Bill? Perhaps hiding behind the tree was Mr. Magoo, and it was he who fired the bullet that shot Bill in the heart and killed him. Now, we can't be certain whether Tom or Mr. Magoo shot Bill. If Tom shot Bill, Tom is guilty of murder, and the judge will sentence him to 25 years in prison. Again, the question for you is it fair for a jury to find Tom guilty of murdering Bill? And if so, why? I want you to pause this video and discuss this in your table groups. Now we come to our last case scenario. The police find Tom with a gun. Bill is lying dead in front of Tom. Poor old Bill, he's certainly been killed a few times today. In this case, Bill has been killed by a bullet fired by Tom that has hit Bill in the heart. Again, the question for you is, did Tom murder Bill? Take a moment to discuss this in your table groups while the video is paused. Some of you may have concluded that Tom did in fact murder Bill. But did you consider the possibility that perhaps Tom was asleep in his house when he heard a noise? He took out his gun and he walked downstairs in the dark. And then, when he turned on the light, he was suddenly confronted by two ninja warriors who were about to attack and kill Tom. One of those ninja warriors might have been Bill. And as a result of that, Tom shot Bill because Bill was otherwise about to stab Tom to death. Now, we can't be certain whether Tom shot Bill in self-defence or whether he shot Bill when Bill tried to run away. If Tom shot Bill while Bill was running away, then Tom would be guilty of murder, and the judge will sentence him to prison for 25 years. The question for you to discuss in your table groups is it fair for a jury to find Tom guilty of murdering Bill? And if so, why? Let's pause this video while you have this discussion in your table groups. I hope that these case scenarios have illustrated to you the importance of the presumption of innocence. It may be that a person is charged with a crime, such as here, where Tom has been charged with the murder of Bill. However, the mere fact that the police have charged a person with a crime does not mean that that person is guilty. That is, it doesn't mean that that person actually committed the crime that they have been charged with. We can only conclude that a person is guilty of a crime if they have had a fair trial at which all the evidence has been presented, and if a jury, after considering all of that evidence, has decided that the accused did in fact commit the crime. The presumption of innocence is therefore that an accused person is presumed to be innocent until they are proven guilty. And this presumption is a fundamental principle of our criminal justice system. Again, we always presume that an accused person is innocent until or unless they are found to be guilty at a fair trial. Now we're going to look at two other important principles of criminal law which support the presumption of innocence. The first of these is the burden, sometimes called the onus of proof, and the second is the standard of proof. Let's look first at the burden of proof. We say that the prosecution bears the burden of proof. That is, it is the prosecution's responsibility to prove that an accused committed the crime with which they have been charged. An accused person never has to prove that they are innocent. What that means is that if you are charged with a crime and you are having a trial before a court, it's for the prosecution to produce sufficient evidence to convince a jury that you are in fact guilty of that crime. You don't have to prove that you didn't commit the crime. In fact, you can rely on your right to silence and you can refuse to say anything. And in that way, what you're saying to the prosecution is, I don't have to help you prove that I'm guilty. I don't have to prove that I'm innocent. It's entirely up to you, the prosecution, to gather and present sufficient evidence to convince a jury that I am in fact guilty of that crime. The standard of proof is the second really important principle. In a criminal case, the standard of proof, that is, the amount of evidence that the prosecution must provide before a person can be convicted, that amount of evidence is that the prosecution must prove beyond reasonable doubt that the accused has committed the crime. Now, this requires the provision of a very high standard of evidence, because beyond reasonable doubt means that the only reasonable conclusion that can be drawn from the evidence is that the accused committed the crime. If there's a reasonable doubt, that is, there's another possible explanation for what happened other than that the accused committed the crime, then the accused must be acquitted. That is, the jury must find them to be not guilty. To give you a real-life example, there was a case where two identical twins lived in a house next to an old man, and the twins held a party. The party was very loud and it went into the early hours of the morning. The old man became very upset and he called the police, who came round to the twins' house and asked them to turn the music down. The twins knew that the old man had called the police. So, after the police had left, one of the twins went next door with a baseball bat and bashed the old man to death. Now, the police weren't sure which of the twins had bashed the old man to death. There were no witnesses. All they knew was that one of the twins had committed the crime. And in those circumstances, even though the police charged one of the twins with the crime of murder, the jury had to acquit that twin because they couldn't be sure that the other twin hadn't committed the murder. In those circumstances, there was a reasonable doubt that the accused, that is, the twin who had been charged with murder, there was a reasonable doubt that that twin hadn't actually killed the old man, but that the other twin had. There is a principle of law that says it's better that 10 guilty people go free than that one innocent person is convicted. That's why we have the presumption of innocence. That's why the prosecution has the responsibility of proving that the accused is guilty, and that's why the standard of proof, that is, the amount of evidence that the prosecution must produce, has to show or prove beyond reasonable doubt that the accused committed the crime. The reason we say that it's better that 10 guilty people should go free than that one innocent person should be convicted is that the consequences for an innocent person of being incorrectly convicted of a crime they didn't commit are so serious. Go back to Tom's position. He may not have murdered Bill in any of those scenarios that we looked at, but if he was to be convicted of murdering Bill, then we have just destroyed Tom's life. Tom has been sent to jail for 25 years. Jail is not a very nice place to be in. Tom mixes with criminals. He could be bashed up in jail. He could be psychologically abused in jail. He's had a criminal conviction recorded against him, so when he gets out of jail after 25 years, he's going to find it very hard to get a job. The only people he's made friends with, if he indeed has any friends, are people from jail. They are criminals. And so the real risk for Tom is that he can't get a job, he can't earn money, so he slips back into a life of crime and he commits further crimes. So here are some questions for you. After each question, I would like you to pause the video so that you've got an opportunity to write an answer. Let's look at the first question. What is the presumption of innocence? Let's pause the video and we'll give you 2 minutes to write an answer to this question. Here's the next question. How is the burden of proof in a criminal case consistent with the presumption of innocence? That is, how does the burden of proof support the presumption of innocence? You'll need a little bit longer to answer this question, so I suggest we pause the video and give you 4 to 5 minutes to write an answer to this question. Here is the next question. How is the standard of proof in a criminal case consistent with the presumption of innocence? You'll remember that the standard of proof in a criminal case is that the prosecution has to prove beyond reasonable doubt that the accused committed the crime. Again, let's pause the video and give you 4 to 5 minutes to write an answer to that question. Here's the next question, a little bit more difficult. What are the competing interests that underlie the presumption of innocence? Put another way, what are the arguments in favour of the presumption of innocence, and what are the arguments against the presumption of innocence? Again, let's pause the video and take 4 to 5 minutes to write your answer to this question. And finally, we come to the most important question of all, which is, why is the presumption of innocence important? Let's pause the video, and you can take perhaps around 10 minutes to write your answer to this very, very important question. Put down as many points as you can think of. Now that you've finished answering these questions, if there's time in class, please share your answers with your table group. If you think that someone has made a point that you haven't got, and you really like that point, then copy that point down into your answers. That brings us now to the learning intention. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to describe the presumption of innocence, describe the burden of proof and the standard of proof for a criminal case, and as you've just done, through your written answers, explain the importance of the presumption of innocence, the burden of proof, and the standard of proof in a criminal case. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'll see you at our next class.